So with me, I have a terrific panel of guests that will talk through some of these forces. To my left, I have Matan Grinsberg, founder and CEO of Factory. Factory is building droids, agents that help automate software development. Prior to founding Factory, Matan was pursuing his PhD in theoretical physics at the University of California, Berkeley. To the left of Matan is Michael Grinnick, founder and CEO of WorkOS. WorkOS provides products like SSO that allow applications to become enterprise-ready with a couple of lines of code. Prior to WorkOS, Michael was the founder of Nihilus, which introduced the world's first open-source email client. And then to the left of Michael, we have Sudheesh Nair. Sudheesh is the founder and CEO of TinyFish. TinyFish allows web automation for AI agents. Prior to founding TinyFish, Sudheesh was the president of Nutanix, where he ran sales and grew the business from 0 to over $1 billion. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Awesome. So jumping in, a lot of people talk about the unique dynamics of AI. Sudheesh, Michael, you guys have both started companies before. Maybe to just highlight how different it is this time, what have you found harder this time than you did last time, even though you've done it before?
Wow, great question to kick off with. You know, AI, it feels like so many things have changed in the world. One thing is the speed at which you can build software. I think there's been like 3 or 4 miracles that happened over the last 2 years, and that's one of them. Mm-hmm. And so in the past, you know, if companies were able to kind of discover their market and do some research and start developing, kind of meander their way to product market fit, you could do that because the competition couldn't necessarily catch up. It just took a lot of time and energy to build stuff. And that's no longer the case with the, whatever you want to call it, like AI-assisted software engineering or full agentic development. You go from 0 to 100 in the order of minutes. And I think that really fundamentally changes the entire innovation pace of the whole ecosystem. So you just really can never rest on your laurels. I don't know if there are any moats anymore when it comes to product. Speed is the only thing that matters.
Yeah, I think the question was what has gotten harder? I think nothing is harder. In fact, everything has gotten easier for startups. That's my view. Because every startup that's ever built never reached the destination in a straight line. It's always been course correction. And the course correction requires feedback loop. And that feedback loop is so short now. Companies can actually make quick corrections and get back on trajectory as fast as possible because the experiment between an idea, deployment, and feedback is so short. So that also means that not a lot of people want to start companies, but it's one thing to get it off. And then there are some fundamentals that hasn't changed. CJ talked about that in the previous session. So it's an interesting time for every company. And I'm just grateful to be in the middle of all of it.
Yeah, totally. And Matan, maybe to come to you, this is your first time as a founder, coming out of research to found a company. What surprised you?
I mean, I think maybe this is not very representative, but I like to always joke that this is not just the first time I've started a company, but this is technically the first time I've had a job. Because the prior decade, all I was doing was theoretical physics research, which is also very much like a single-player sport. Mm-hmm. So a whole lot has been surprising. I mean, in part, just building a team, working with people that are so incredibly talented that makes it, it seems trivial, but it's very eye-opening for me just how important the first few people you bring into the team are. And obviously learning how important sales is, especially when there are a lot of crowded spaces. And I think maybe something that I've seen over the last 2.5 years that's been really interesting is when we first started talking to enterprise engineering leaders about agent-native software development, mm-hmm. they're all kind of like shooing us away, like, yeah, like that's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. It's going to take decades. To now, the question is not, how does it work? Will it happen? Is it relevant? It's how can we change the behavior of our developers as quickly as possible? And that's been really cool to see over such a short period of time.
I want to touch on that, kind of where we are in the market. So I saw an interesting statistic the other day. If you sum up the value of every frontier lab, everybody that's making models, it's just over $1 trillion. So it's a market category that's emerged if you consider OpenAI, the founding of OpenAI as the start, just in a decade and created $1 trillion of value. Now, if you sum up the value of all the application layer or agent companies, like a couple on this stage, as well as the Gleans, the Perplexities, et cetera, it's only $50 billion. What are you seeing actually in the market? Does that reflect the fact that people are still building the applications that we'll use for AI, or are we past that point of maturity, and is it there?
I can go. I think someone once said, like, what's the commonality between commercial banking, the modern type of banking, and hydraulic fracturing and Levi jeans? I think it's kind of think of like different things, but they all started during the gold rush. And these are inventions that came out of necessity. And gold rush is over, but those jeans are still there. I'm pretty sure somebody's wearing a Levi's jeans in this room. The tectonic shift that is happening in the AI era is difficult to explain unless you are right in the middle of it. So because it is such a big tectonic shift, just like railroads and jeans and pickaxe and all of those things were sort of invented and built and shipped and supply chained, right now, this is the time to do infrastructure. And if you ask why OpenAI and other model companies are trying to become more of an infrastructure company, the ADKs and orchestration, it's because everything that we are building is also getting commoditized. But that doesn't necessarily mean everything commodity is also going to be easy for accessing, right? So that's the consolidation of the stack that is currently being built. That doesn't necessarily mean that application layers are less important, or software will become on demand that anyone can build for every use case. Just like every other every time when cars were invented, people thought, okay, what will happen to all the road and horse farmers? Everything changed. So this is one of those opportunities where I do think the revolution is starting from the bottom up.
Any responses?
Yeah, I guess it's a debate whether you think that the major AI labs are going to go into the application layer or not. So OpenAI seems to be doing a lot there, and I mean, who here in the audience uses Claude Code? It's like an application, it's like application level capability. But at maturity, you can tell that the application layer is always bigger than the infrastructure layer. Like the sum of all the utilities built on top of a service should outpace it. The amount of value created on top of Microsoft Windows is larger than Microsoft as a company. I think it's probably just more sequencing. Yeah. To build things at the application layer requires really understanding that last mile of the value you're going to bring to a customer, and that you really need to understand what the customer is trying to do in their process, and figure out how to sell it directly to them. And it's just kind of messy, And I think it just takes time for entrepreneurs to discover those areas and apply the technology to it. But I would say it's probably a pretty good time to be an application level investor, because this wave is definitely going to push that.
And maybe just because you mentioned that's coming, right? WorkOS, you're the only one of these three companies that was started before the AI wave. But you've done a pretty effective job of capturing the AI companies as they've come about. How do you think about that? If you know there's a wave of agents that are coming, there's a wave of new apps that are coming as a result of this shift, how do you make sure that WorkOS is the auth provider or the toolkit for them?
Yeah, I will definitely give a WorkOS sales pitch to anyone who wants to. Yeah, I mean, we were started 7 years ago. We do a lot of stuff around authentication and identity and security for B2B software. And so there's always been B2B SaaS for a long period of time. What's different now is all of these AI companies, I think, are B2B software companies at the end of the day. That's how they deliver value. They're not consumer product companies. They're not games. They're not social networks. They're not open source things. They're B2B software companies. They sell to other organizations. And although the AI stuff makes the product so much more different and disruptive, the customers kind of care about the same stuff. They care about the same value. And so there's a lot of things that are actually pretty similar to the previous era. We're at the MongoDB conference. Databases still exist. It's not like we got rid of databases with AI. And in many cases, it's more important. And with AI products, they grow faster. They go up market sooner. they're typically scrutinized by security teams and IT teams much quicker in their life cycle. And so these things that used to maybe be at the periphery or things that were only needed in special cases now I think are needed by all of the companies. And our biggest thing that we have done right as a company at WorkOS to capture this wave, I think is like just kind of being lucky, right place, right time, having built this for many years. I wish I was clairvoyant. I would be an investor and not an entrepreneur. But yeah, we're supporting a bunch of the AI businesses today.
One thing I'd just add is, on the, summing the market of the model labs and it being $1 trillion, if you go back like 3 years, it was probably actually closer to 50 billion. And so I think if you like incorporate that delta of how long it takes for, research ideas to come about within the labs and then that to come down into the model and then application layer companies figuring out the best interaction pattern for people to see it and then large enterprises to go through procurement and actually try it out and then pay for it. It's, you can kind of see that pipeline coming through. And so my guess is there's probably anywhere from like a 12 to 36 month delay in like the total volume of market value in the model labs versus the application layer.
It likely will be faster because now it's easier to build stuff.
Yes.
Then I mean, building these model companies, the foundational models took many, many years and lots of infrastructure to build. I mean, if you want to build an application level AI product, you can do that pretty fast.
Maybe, right? The technology may be faster, but adoption requires change management.
Yep.
And so I think everybody here is selling to enterprises in some shape or form. What are you seeing? Like Matan, for example, if someone adopts factory within their enterprise, maybe they have to change how they organize their software engineering organization, right?
Yeah.
So how are enterprises adapting? Are you seeing that change management happen now, or is it still on the come?
Well, I mean, another thing is just, something that's true is generally developers tend to be pretty stubborn and pretty opinionated on certain workflows. In particular, if there are workflows that they've built up for, the last 20 years, let's say. And so there's kind of a delicate balance of, you want to respect the fact that they have these workflows because they've kind of iterated on every possible permutation and found, this is the optimal one. And so there's this balance of like respecting that, but then also keeping in mind that it's kind of incumbent upon all of us to basically take a sledgehammer to every habit or workflow that we've formed in the past, because chances are we can do it way better and way faster with AI. And so there's the balance. So you don't want to be like, the dictatorial CTO that's like, you guys all need to go and use X, Y, you have to use droids, you have to use factory for this, or you have to use some other tool for that. So you want to have the balance of like giving them a little bit of a taste of it, and then they naturally go and do it, because they'll be able to do it faster. But then also, kind of shake them a little of like, if you don't do this, we are going to fall behind. We are not going to be able to ship at the speed that we could be. So it's a delicate balance, I think.
I like to say that software is something that Salesforce and others have taken and say, you don't need to have it, let me host it, and then you come to me. There is something else happening here, which is like our board update. I don't know if you got it, but that's an app that we shared because we started doing that soon. And that app is going to be used maybe once by you, and then you will probably never use that again. And that's OK. That's an ephemeral software piece that we built. And the difference here is when you are going to a software, the last mile is always going to be hard and it will be custom. Because if you're building a software that needs to be used for 100,000 people, 1 million people, you can never make it hyper-personalized for each one's need, no matter how much onboarding games you play. But in this new world, where you can actually build software for that specific demand and then ship it, like our board updates, it's not a PowerPoint, it is not a document, it's not a Google Sheet. It's an app that we built based on things that we have figured out, and then our own way of building it and sharing it with them, with the idea that the cost of building is so low and the value of hyper-personalization is so high, it just makes sense. So the idea of software as something massive that used to come from the cloud or from the CD, if you just reimagine that, what happens is that onboarding and this idea of going to enterprise and teaching them how to do things, customizing them, the consulting, the professional services, NetSuite. I remember when our company was going public at Nutanix, we tried to do NetSuite. And I was shocked because after cutting the PO, the start date was like 7 months later. And I was like, what the hell? And they're like, well, that is how long the customization services take. And you have to play services, and the license starts from the very first day. think about the amount of waste that exists, and at the end of it, it is still somewhat customized for a mid-size SMB, not like for us. We are all individuals. We have our own likes and dislikes. Imagine software being built just for you, maybe by you, to do exactly what you need, and after that, you don't care.
There's this great term I've heard people use, calling it disposable software. This idea that you can generate it so fast, it's ephemeral. If it's easy to recreate it, just throw it away, you know? And it's such a hard thing to wrap your head around if you've existed for years in a world where the code base was this like precious thing that you've invested a lot into, that there's a tremendous amount of value in, to say, oh, we'll just keep the prompt. Maybe the prompt is actually the source code, you know, the conversation versus the code base,
maybe, yeah.
the context.
Yeah.
It's just such a strange thing to wrap your head around. I don't know. I find myself laying in bed sleepless at night trying to figure out where this is going.
I totally buy the concept, right? But so much about building a business is market timing. And do you think enterprises or generally businesses outside of, let's say, the Bay Area and New York, are they ready for this? Do they understand it? Are you hitting resistance when you talk to companies about these concepts?
I mean, I can start. I mean, I've done enterprise business, Nutanix and ThoughtSpot. I have never seen enterprises being more open for this than now, but is that enough? I don't know yet, for sure. But what I can tell you is that they are kicking the tires. So this is one of the things that we have to be very careful. All this revenue, value creation we are talking about, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, if you go to talk to an enterprise, they usually don't take the meeting. Even if you do it, it is going to be a science project. But today, you can, if you're a hot new AI company from San Francisco, pretty much every Global 2000 company will give you the meeting and maybe even give you a pilot. But none of those things guarantee durable revenue. So when we talk about, like all of us AI companies talk about ARR, they kind of now co-opting that to say annual run rate. The ARR used to be, recurring revenue. And both those words are extremely important. Revenue is a GAAP construct, and recurring means it is robust. You have to be able to build NDRs and others. So in that context, maybe the enterprise is not ready, but we don't know that yet. Mm-hmm. They're saying all the right things, but we'll see.
I think one thing that's been helpful is also the fact that a lot of these things have a very approachable visualization of how good things have gotten, which I wasn't really in tech during the cloud boom, but there's something about vibe coding that is just so approachable that even like a child can very quickly understand the power of doing something like vibe coding, and then it kind of makes it easy for engineering leaders to get a sense of, okay, even though this is not production grade, I can see what the delta is here. Mm-hmm. Even if these are people not in San Francisco or New York, there's just a very visceral sense of, okay, this is clear. Like my 5-year-old right now can build an app when clearly 5 years ago could not do that. So there is something here. It is probably worthwhile for our business to go and investigate. Obviously, pending the caveats of we need to make sure this is actually production grade. Integrates with all of the brownfield use cases that we have, but it's easier to get a visceral sense of what's possible.
Mm-hmm. I think we're mislabeling it as software engineering. Like there's a lot of people that write software that have built applications, that have built companies that's software engineering, and we see the vibe coding thing, and you look at it, and you're like, this is how the next Airtable is going to get built, this way, and it kind of makes sense because that's the only reference we have for people building companies and products. But if you look globally, there's roughly 30 million software engineers, kind of traditional software engineers. If you imagine that we've made it about 10 times easier to write software, which is probably severe under categorization, you could say there's an additional 270 million people that can now create what we would call software. And they're doing it through this conversational medium, creating something that you could criticize as not being durable or scalable, or maybe they don't even know what the code is. But the reality is they're making stuff, and there's this judgment to call it not engineering. But I think this is what technology has always been about, is democratizing access to stuff. I remember talking to engineers who would say, if you were writing code in an interpreted language that didn't compile, that wasn't real engineering. Or if you weren't writing assembly, or you weren't doing real memory management, you're not a real engineer. It's just been this continued process. And so I think there's a risk that we're judging it looking backwards versus judging it looking forwards. And these things that are created that you could call apps, we probably need like a different name for them. It's something in between a document and an app. If you can throw it away and recreate it, what is it? I don't know. I don't know. We're at that frontier. But I think it's fundamentally something very, very different.
I mean, I think there is something very interesting. If you really think about every business, there is this labor arbitrage that happens between the people who use the tool and the people who know the craft. What is happening right now is those 30 million software developers, they were the craft people, and they knew the secret language of how to talk to computers. They knew C++, they knew the Python and all of that. But almost always the requirements were coming from the CFO or the CEO or the salesperson or the marketer. And they are the ones who are coming and saying, or the customers are giving you these ideas. And it's sort of like, I had this hubris once, like I would be really good at making potteries. Because in my mind, I can conceive all these amazing designs and how to do, and I've seen some videos on YouTube, and I can see like the potter's wheel is running, put my finger, boom. And then finally, I had access to a potter's wheel. That's when I realized I'm not cut out for that. See, the difference is what happened with AI is that potter's wheel doesn't matter. I can now make the kind of pottery that is in my head show up. It may not be the highest quality, but often, more often than not, 90+% I will venture to say, it's more than enough. A CFO who's trying to figure out what is the working capital situation, how do I figure out the scenario A, B, C, doesn't have to go to FP and a team and then communicate the hell out of it and then go back and forth. No, this is not what I want. That is powerful. That is what is possible. So this is why it is important, the people who just have the tools and the masters of the tools, the Prometheus is here, taken the fire and given to the people now. It's just not with the gods anymore.
That creates an incredible leadership problem, though, right? It makes it hard. In the last couple of years, we've seen several new companies that have come up and got to 100 million in revenue in less than 12 months, as well as with much fewer than 100 employees. So now that traditionally what we thought of as a Series A company in terms of revenue and employee count, all of those benchmarks are completely thrown out the window with AI and how much leverage you get off of a single employee. How do you guys as leaders think about what are the milestones my company wants to hit? How do I need to build my organization in this new world where every employee is capable of different things?
Yeah, well, I guess one thing I would slightly push back on is I would actually argue that the best engineers have always been the ones that have the broader systems thinking to understand, here are the constraints from the customer side or from, our business side, or, they can kind of very carefully lay out what are the constraints that we need to be satisfying with whatever piece of software that we build. And then, I also happen to be fluent in the language that can codify those constraints into a formal language. And the reality is, if you're good at doing that, whether or not you know a formal programming language, now it doesn't matter. But it's always been a means to an end and not the end in itself. Now, I think there are a lot of people who have appreciated the beauty of the formal programming languages themselves, because I think there is a lot of beauty there. But the point is, it's always been the means, not the end itself. The end has always been, here's a unique problem, and these are the constraints that if I build something that satisfies those constraints, then the problem is solved. Or we'll put it out in the world and then figure out, we forgot this constraint. Now it feels a little bit actually like pottery because you have these kind of different edges that you're molding and crafting to these different constraints. It's just now that you don't need years of experience learning what incantations to whisper to the compiler, and instead you can just say it in
Fair enough, yeah. I think he had a question, but how are you preparing? Yeah.
I was thinking about this 100 million. There was some snarky tweet recently that 100 million isn't like a success point, it's a filter.
Must be an investor.
I guess it depends on your margins.
Yeah. Love the snarky tweets. I think it's because it's disrupting labor. So that's what you said earlier. These companies are providing real value. There's AI experiments that are failing, and there's a lot of places where, big companies will throw money at stuff. But by and large, more interesting stuff is getting built. The products are much more innovative. The AI capabilities let you make it more disruptive, but also you can build it faster, with fewer people. And I think the future is actually maybe kind of bleak for Series A, Series B investors. These companies will raise a seed round. Today's seed round is like the Series A of 10, 15 years ago. You raise $3-4 million, which is a lot of money. You hire 10 people, and you start accelerating your revenue, and you get it to 30, 40, 50 million in revenue. You become wildly cash flow positive, and you just grow the business. You don't need to go raise $200 million. It used to be that at the growth scale, things get more complicated as you get larger. You slow down. Sales and marketing gets really expensive. If you can optimize that or operationalize that with AI, the capital requirements for things getting built might just plummet, which is not great for maybe VC investors, but really good for the whole world. That's really good for everyone else. Like if we can lower the activation energy, there'll be a Cambrian explosion of new things getting built. And so I think this idea of like, what's the milestone you need to hit to raise the next round, it actually misrepresents the goal. The goal of the entrepreneur is not to raise money. The goal of the entrepreneur is to build a thriving, successful business in an incredible market.
Yeah,
And
well said, yeah.
I would also add, I think something that's great about that is also like lowering the threshold for how much economic value does a problem need to have in order for it to be worthwhile to create a business around. And by lowering that threshold, that just means that there are more problems in the world that will be solved, which I think is just objectively a net good.
We got this with like web software. You know, it used to be there was only like one CRM, which is like Oracle, more or less. You know, you had to go pay them all this money to build something. And then through, you know, open source databases and runtimes and frameworks and tools and web engineering, now you can build like the CRM for farmers in Northern California that grow Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
You know, and you can go sell it to, you know, a couple thousand customers and make a good business around it, you know, that democratization. So I think that's what's going to happen. And I think it's actually very, very good for the world. And we shouldn't be as focused on, I don't know, what the milestone is for fundraising.
I think I would say two things. The first is, you know, operationally, like I always get excited about operationally looking at things from a geeky point of view. So first, let me give you the answer of not the valuation side, but inside out. There are two modalities of selling if you're selling to enterprise, which is just focused on enterprise, and others sell to enterprise as well as to, let's call prosumers. Let's assume you're not selling to consumers. The difference is enterprise business hasn't changed from a go-to-market as much in the sense that you have to still get to these enterprise. You have to understand the vertical, the use case, the persona, the playbook. How do you get there? What are the sort of places where you can actually come and, you know, catch you? So there is a fixed ratio there, and the efficiency might differ. You know, at 1.2 versus 1.7 million, a single rep can retire a year. What's the ratio of SC, maybe BDRs, you know, it's AI BDR, so maybe it's lower. But there is a numerator and a denominator. And then you figure out what is the capacity, is the product ready, then you keep burning and hopefully, you know, grows. So but that is just a straight shot. What has changed now is the other business, the platform business, where if you really deliver amazing product, the product should be built to sell. Product should be built to market. Product should be built to upsell and cross-sell and problem solve and market itself in ways that feels authentic. It's not overselling. It's not underselling. And if you do that, that effort is relatively constant, and the return potentially could have the network effect. If you hit into a platform like Matans, and if they start distributing tiny fish, for example, right? These sort of things, what happens is the same denominator, but the numerator keep growing. So when you think of planning for a business like this, you have to plan with a view that this is going to be a monthly AOP planning. If you're not seeing, you're not going to do it. Can you run both, or do you want to sequence it? A lot of companies start here and then go to enterprise. Maybe that's not the right idea. But not doing both is also not an option, because even in enterprise, someone could come to a conference like this, go to Tiny Fish, find that, do some passion project, then go to office and say, hey, maybe we can solve our supply chain problem with Tiny Fish AI, which you can. This is the kind of thing that happens now. So you got to fish where the fish are, and fish are hanging out everywhere now. It's just a, you know, from an operational point of view, this is as exciting as the disruption that's happening in the software engineering.
I think one thing on that as well that I was going to mention is
Disagree?
Well, just regarding, I think, your initial question.
Yeah.
And,
he and I have to have a conversation after this.
But, you know, talking about like revenue ramps, I think it actually matters a lot, especially now more than ever, like the kind of revenue. Because if I just open up a shop, you know, here in San Francisco, and I'm selling $10 for $1, I can get to 100 million in revenue very quickly, but I just burned $1 billion doing so, right? And so I think, you know, handing someone a $10 bill in exchange for a $1 bill is not revenue in the traditional sense of, like, you know, when people think about going 0 to 100. And I think that's something that is also difficult because there's definitely subsidization happening, a lot of different tools, because there's some value in getting data. Some of these tools are, some model labs, for example, have billions of dollars that they've raised so they can afford doing that to kind of attract more users their direction. But I think that's kind of a dangerous game. And that's just something that, from my perspective, why we've always been focused on the enterprise is in the enterprise, you don't play that game. I think on the growth, self-service side, that's something that sometimes is relevant, but having that grounding in kind of long-term durable revenue matters a lot.
Let me just say 3 quick things about the durability of revenue. He's so right, but he only talked about one thing. There are 2 more things. The first one is a lot of these companies have amazing concentration of customers, which is a huge problem. When we were taking our company public, that was the #1 thing all the public investors were worried about. We had an OEM. If you think of some of these companies, model companies are essentially their largest, or Meta, or all of this. So there is significant amount of consumer concentration, #1. #2, developers are some of the most disloyal customers in there, because every week they're trying to figure out, which one is cheaper. Can I just port it? And the third is the point that he made with respect to everyone is funding NVIDIA, essentially. Investors are taking money from wherever, sovereign wealth fund, and then funneling it through a startup to a model company to NVIDIA. So this also is not sustainable overall. So that is why, CJ is sitting here very comfortably talking about, 17-year-old company, we are very young, because like he said, banking applications are built on this. These things, it'll take time.
So I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said. Some of these companies will not be around. They have customer concentration problems. The margins are non-existent. And all sorts of other potentially fundamental problems with their business model. Regardless, they're still making a lot of noise in the market. So every other day there's a fundraising announcement. In some cases there's models or new technology breakthroughs. In a world where things are always getting announced, there's so much noise, how do you guys personally cut through the noise? And then more importantly, how do you keep your teams grounded? How do you make sure your product strategy is thorough and not just chasing whatever shiny toy you see?
I think to some extent, our job is to be shock absorbers for certain things and not others. So for example, if your team is having emotional whiplash every time a competitor announces something, you're not absorbing enough. But also, if you're just being kind of blissfully ignorant of everything that's happening in the competitive landscape, you're not going to be in a good position. So I think, in general, it's just being really intellectually honest with everything that's happening and really encouraging just down to the DNA of the company, curiosity. So there's a competitor that's getting a lot of attention and people are using it. Let's go try it out and see, is this actually something that we would use at the end of the day? If the answer is no, then it's okay, sometimes media is fickle and people fixate on something even if it's not actually that great, and time will just kind of sort those things out.
Yeah.
But if we do go and try something and we think it's very clever or interesting, then we shouldn't be shy to try and do something like that, see if there's a spin that we can put on it and make it our own.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy market right now. The talent market is crazy. The fundraising market is crazy. The pace of innovation, it's very unexpected when new models come out and the capabilities emerge and you can do totally different things. So we don't really plan a roadmap further than 3 months out of the company, if that. We reevaluate the entire business every single Monday in a staff meeting, go through everything. And we've actually done that since at the beginning of the company, but I think it's especially important right now with how fast stuff is changing, to see opportunities to try things, to adjust. The only certainty is you're going to be wrong about something. It's just in what dimension and what amplitude. And so I think there's an element of somewhat paranoia. One of my favorite books is Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove, who led Intel for a long time. And I think that there's a lot of lessons from that in particular could be useful right now in the market.
I don't think there is any way to stay away from the noise. Twitter and LinkedIn. And the thing is, everyone is making noise, and it's very difficult to see what is happening, really, right? And it's sort of we get a lot of front row seats to see the performances, and we have one backstage pass, which is ours. And then we are going back to our backstage pass and comparing that to the show that others are putting on, and that's unfair. But having said that, it's all very difficult to stay away from that. I myself get like my head sometimes full of stuff that we should be doing based on a tweet that I see that I forward, and somebody else puts something, all of the stuff happens. Experience helps a little bit, but in general, I like to think of it as ship the product first if you haven't shipped. Like that's the #1 thing. And then be very intentional about not losing any customer that you got, whether it's a developer or a large enterprise. If a customer walks away from you, the entire company should care, and the entire company should feel like they are in sales. What happens is when you make the company intensely focus on customers and value creation, and then talk about what is value realization is and how does continuous value realization happen. These sort of things, engineers are some of the most curious ones when it comes to seeing their code, delivering value for customers, put them. So the antidote for all this noise is acute customer focus, maniacal customer focus. Of course, even then you will have it, but if you ship the product, usually even if things are going wrong in customer venues, the engineers like to jump into that. So they have less time, fewer cycles to waste on other stuff.
There's one more thing I would add to this, which is the way you beat the noise is by becoming the noise. And I think today in the market, if there's like a CEO or leader of a company who's not engaging with that, constantly talking about the business, like really throwing themselves out there, your business isn't going to do very well. There's no like secret that you can evade it and still be successful. You need to rise to the level that's out there, and that's just kind of the reality.
Yeah. I want to wrap up with one last question and ask each of you to make a prediction for what's going to be the thing this year. But maybe I'll start with a lengthier prompt, which is last year in November, or actually November 2024, MCP started to become very popular. And I think, Michael, you guys did a really good job of jumping on that and creating these MCP nights, which are quite popular. So maybe talk to us about how you got conviction at the end of 24 that MCP was going to be the thing, and then maybe wrap up with what the thing is for 2026.
That's a great question. I mean, I'm like an engineer, grew up like tinkering on stuff and building stuff, and kind of got into infrastructure by building. If you're an engineer, the best thing to build is stuff for other engineers. It like feels really good. So I still play around with stuff, and I saw MCP, and it was just cool. It was like this. It's rare you get like new protocols or new experimental behaviors and things. And I think very early on, I saw that there was something very special with it, and I just was kind of following my nose, and it turned out to be right. It's kind of the same thing that, when I do like little angel investments or we build new products, it's almost always the same intuition. So I don't know. In terms of the next year, I don't know. You're in the future prediction game. I only see 3 months ahead. SpaceX IPO? I don't know. Maybe it's happening. I actually think in the AI world, voice is going to be a huge thing. I think most people don't talk about it for whatever reason enough. But I mostly use ChatGPT in voice mode. I put my headphones on, I walk my dog, I talk to it. And voice is the most...
Talk to the dog or?
Oh, well, yeah. Yes.
2029, maybe.
You never know. I mean, voice is the most natural way of how humans express. We learn to speak before we learn how to write. It is just an innate thing that is in our biology, in our chemistry, in our humanity. And I think it's the ultimate jump to probably that and robotics to truly bring kind of AI closer to us. Like to me, the language model innovation was actually not all this stuff about imagery or reasoning. It made computers like more human. For the first time, instead of us needing to go to the machine got closer to us. And I think voice is going to be another enormous step in that direction.
I think retrospectively, we'll probably look at 2026 as the year at which consensus that AGI is here was reached, or at least past 50%. And I think the reality is, maybe this is a hot take. I think it has been here, but sometimes it takes an Andre Karpathy tweet for everyone else to realize it. And I think there might be a couple more of those tweets coming this year, and then everyone is going to have more of a consensus on that.
Do you have a sense of what AGI is to you? What's your test?
It's like a gut test of just it can do a lot of stuff that you don't want to do and that you would pay someone to do. And I think trying to quantify it, it's one of those things where it's how much water is in a cup till it's a cup of water. There's no definitive. And I think it's just like the general consensus. Maybe the consensus is just defined by how much Andre Karpathy tweets about it. But I think we will look back and like in 2050, in history books when they say, when did AGI come? I think retrospectively, they will say 2026.
There's that thing in the OpenAI charter where when we achieve AGI, it like flips.
Yeah.
Oh, so there's some weird
There will be
incentives
like an actual delineated moment in that case.
Yeah.
I suck at predicting stuff that way. I can't predict anything that I can't control, so a lot of these things are very out of my control. I do think that this will be the year, looking at MongoDB, enterprise customers are going to start demanding return on investment. I can see the signs already happening. They were like, oh, we can't miss, so we just go do something. And I can start seeing that people are like, okay, what you said XYZ, savings and improvement, where is that? So we'll see. My worry is that Mark Benioff will just simply capture all of that then, all that angst into dollars for Salesforce.
There's a reason why he's got the biggest building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have. I want to thank our panelists again for a wonderful conversation, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you all.